Hello, Raleigh. This is citizen reporter Robert Courts coming to you from the YBY-Raleigh News Network. And today I have the opportunity to speak with Councilwoman Christina Jones. Ms. Jones, thank you for joining us.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, it's my pleasure. We have had a great relationship with you on the YBY network and your support for local businesses and your timely communications with us. So really do appreciate your commitment to citizen engagement.
Anytime. Thank you.
But today I really want to discuss because local businesses downtown are in an uproar, Mrs. Jones, about the thought of losing Red Hat Amphitheater. And there's a lot of anxiety, a lot of frustration, and I appreciate you taking a minute to provide some clarity.
Most definitely. I'd like to start this by just giving a brief overview in case people are watching that don't understand what's happening. In 2023, so last year, about a year ago, we approved what's called the ILA, the Interlocal Agreement. And that is where your hospitality tax, when you go out to eat or you go to a hotel, the taxes that are received there go into this fund that's called the Interlocal Fund. And those fund big things across the counties, not just in Raleigh, but every 2 years we get to say, okay, how do we want to spend the money that has been accumulated? And so last year we said we wanted to help keep the hurricanes here, which is great, got them for 20 years. But the other part of that deal was the convention center. You know, our convention center is getting kind of up there in years, and we want to make sure that we are keeping it up to date, and so that we get a lot of concerts or conventions. Concerts are in relation to the Red Hat Amphitheater, which is right behind currently the convention center. In order for us to expand into that spot, we need to move Red Hat. And last year, when we were told this, we were told it was just going to move a street over, and the convention center would be built. There'd be walkways across McDowell, and that Red Hat would be in that empty lot right next to that. And
let me pause for a minute, Mrs. Jones. So a year ago, there was a plan in place, suggested, very forward, very talked about, very well known. Yes?
Yes, okay. And that was all part of that process. And we want to move Red Hat right across the street. And it seemed like an easy fix. We were like, this sounds great, fantastic, done. And so that's about the extent of the information. They gave us this slideshow and they showed us how the moving pieces, the puzzle pieces would go, and it looked great. So that was what was approved. So last year we said, yep, rubber stamp, let's go, let's do all of this. And then in the June meeting, and it was our work session, so I'm going to say it's June 18th, we had a work session prior to our meeting, in which we were presented by staff, and they let us know that the original plan of moving it over a street was not going to work because it was going to reduce the size. There were some easements on Lenore Street where they wanted to shut down Lenore, and it wasn't going to work. And so they were suggesting the alternative was to close down South Street. Okay. Now, we didn't get that information until the Thursday before. I'm sorry.
Well, that's what I want to talk. So we had this plan in place. And all of a sudden, it's not good enough in June. We made a mistake, and now we need to revamp the whole thing.
Right. I don't know about the mistake aspect of it. I don't know. There was some concerns with the easements, I remember. Okay. So when that comes up, staff does their job, and they go and they find alternatives. And their alternative that they found was, instead of closing the north, we could close South Street.
Okay.
Now, the first opportunity that I read about it was that Wednesday or that Thursday before the meeting, because that's when when I get to see this information. And it sounded like, all right, we're going to get this information. Great. In the meantime, between that Thursday and that Tuesday, we were contacted by the Raleigh Housing Authority. And the Raleigh Housing Authority was in stark opposition to closing South Street. And that was the first moment we heard of opposition. And I was like, oh my gracious. Now, when we got to that meeting, the Raleigh Housing Authority showed up. We tried to give them a moment to speak so we can understand, and that was shot down. So they weren't allowed to speak. And it was just an information session. There were no decisions made. So we were like, okay. And at that point, then we started hearing from residents about how isolating it would feel. Right across this site, there is a affordable housing development called Heritage Park that we've done a lot of work on. And that's what the Raleigh Housing Authority was prioritizing and saying, by closing South Street, we are going to block off access to downtown and restrict access. Yes, are there other ways to get downtown for sure. You can go down Lenore Street, you can go, but as you add in the other elements, that the S line, which is the fast, the rail that's going to connect us to Washington, D.C. With an hour quicker commute, that's going to come right there. And it's going to, in the future, close 2 other streets. Ooh. So with that and the housing authority knowing it's all happening in that center, it felt really bad for residents in that area to feel like they are now being put in their own little bubble. And it didn't feel good. In addition, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, just for clarity, right? So they didn't get a chance to voice, the housing didn't get a chance to voice their concerns, but their concerns are not just this move. It's all the other moves and things that had happened in the past and things that are slated for the future. So for their neighborhood, this is just yet another item. Is that correct?
Right. And I don't want to pretend that they were not included, because that would be unfair to the staff. There have been conversations in which the Raleigh Housing Authority was part of that conversation, which is why they knew to alert us and to email all of us that day. I got you. So there was communication between the Raleigh Housing Authority. I don't think there was agreement in the move forward. You know, in the product that was presented to us, there wasn't a unanimous agreement of that. And that's what we were seeing. Now we come to that and we're like, oh, okay, so we asked at our final meeting in July that we do more engagement. You know, we're like, hey, we need residents to understand these things. We also got to do a tour. So each one of the counselors, we did in 2 groups, and we got to walk the tour, walk the area, see exactly what staff was saying. And it made sense. You know, you're like, oh, okay, well, this all makes sense. Staff had also in the interim reached out and come to a possible alternative plan for connection, because the big sticking point is the loss of that connection. So that one block of South Street, which then leads on to McDowell, and you can get into downtown. By blocking that off, that was the big concern. So staff went back and they said, what if when you get to Dawson, instead of going straight on South Street, which will now be blocked off, we put in almost like an on-ramp. It's called a slip lane, right past. So you would make a right and then an immediate left into a slip lane that would curve you around the overpass and then put you right back on McDowell. So instead of going straight, you would make this kind of U around. Sounded like a great idea. We're all like, oh my God, did we solve it? And staff was like, yes, it's a good idea. However, this is up to DOT, state DOT. We don't own this part. We would need their partnership. We would need their approval in that. And so we went, okay, all right. At the same time, we're hearing from residents, vote no. And we're like, we don't have a vote. We clarified. They're like, no, there's no vote. It's not happening until the fall. But there was serious concern because none of those questions had been answered. So we don't know if a slip lane is going to be there. We don't know those things. They're great thoughts, and maybe we can work towards that, but those weren't definite solutions. And so for the community, it felt like, cool, you can say all these things, but if we approve it and then DOT says no, then again, we are bearing the brunt of the growth. And the business entity, the business side of this, who relies on summer traffic for Red Hat, I heard those concerns too. You know, I've spent the time being able to talk to different business owners, to different residents, and business owners are really nervous because this is where their money comes from during the summer. And if they can't have that, and then they have to find another place to live, what does that do to our downtown? And does that make it vibrant like we're trying to do? And so those are also like huge, valid concerns. Staff put together a information session on South Street on July 20th. They closed that portion of the street down to show exactly what it would feel like, not the amphitheater, but the closure of the road, what that would do to traffic. They provided a lot of great information. The transportation department was there. We had a whole bunch of tents set up. We had free food to give out. It was really, really hot that day, for sure. It was the middle of July, so of course it's going to be hot. But it was an opportunity to talk to businesses, to talk to residents and say, hey, go talk to transportation. Go see what these plans are, and then come back to me and tell me what you think. Because this cannot be a decision made just because the 8 of us are like, well, I like the idea and I don't. Right. We need to have that in-depth conversation. And so that was what the intention of what we'll say the block party that was put on. And I got to have a lot of great conversations with both businesses and neighbors. But I came away from it still feeling like we're living in our silos.
Right.
The business community that I had a group of maybe 8 people were talking, and then I walked over to the other group, and it's a group of about 8 residents who were against it. But that conversation in the middle was not happening. I was kind of bringing information back and forth, but what about this? But what about this? And not really having that full conversation.
Let me make sure, sir, I understand this. So you, the counselors, got kind of thrown in the middle here, right? To begin with, we thought it was going to be Lenore Street. There were some last minute changes. I think a lot of the citizens got caught with what's going on. We really haven't, they didn't feel they've been communicated with. You heard from the businesses. And we certainly understand that when your pipeline, your income is threatened, you get nervous. Absolutely. And I appreciate you understanding that. You've been very good to the business community. But also, it's your home. These residents have been there for countless years. So you have the obligation to be available and communicative to both parties. And so, thank you for that. You are not just here from one side or the other, Ms. Jones. We really appreciate you taking this in-depth citizen engagement.
And I want to add one other thing. That it is crucial and it's important to have the full essence of this conversation. And that is that the area of town, specifically South Street, was once what was considered the 4th Ward. Mm-hmm. We have residents come talk to us about how are we erasing history by the development and not even acknowledging what was. Because it's really hurtful for residents who've been there for decades and to see their neighborhoods just go and go and go. And they're always at the brunt of having to make amends and make things work for the betterment of the city. Right. And when that continually happens to our Black and brown communities, it gets really exhausting to want to be part of that and not yell and say, hey, we need somebody to hear us. And that's part of what's going on right here. You know, the business community, I totally understand the economic vitality of the area, completely understand. And then I have to look at the residents who live there and empathize and uplift that this is their home as well. And as I sat, whichever I was right there, back, I looked and I said, man, they are saying a lot of the similar things.
Right.
Oh my gosh, the business community doesn't feel heard. They don't feel like we care about the businesses. And residents are saying the same thing about council. So I sat back and I was like, man, that's a hard pill to swallow, to say in both of these instances, it's 2 different sections of our community saying, city and council, we don't feel like you care about us. And that is so far from the truth. Right. From staff and from council. That's why we do this work. We do this work because we care. And so to hear that, it made me say, you know what? I can't just hope and fingers crossed that they talk to each other. And as I'm having these conversations, I said, what we need is we need a meeting. We need a meeting to where all of us can be there. That's outside of council chambers, because that's as I've learned over the last 2 years, it's a very rigid meeting. You've got specific things you got to do. It's not the place for conversation. And I said, well, we're on break. We're on break until August 20th. So we could do it beforehand, but could everyone be involved? And will you really get the understanding of where counselors are leaning in that conversation?
I do not propose this rushed idea that you mentioned. We need the totality of the neighborhood and the counselors to take this seriously and have the time to discuss it fully. Exactly.
And so with that, I've gone to a few of our counselors. This idea to do this just came up yesterday. I was talking to a business leader in downtown Raleigh and hearing the concerns and really understanding how painful this was for everyone involved. And I said, hey, can you help me? Can we do a meeting? And to hear that immediate, yes, I was like, oh my gosh, this is fantastic. This is what the business community does best, is they help lead us through these conversations. And so I said, well, great. Can we make a meeting and maybe invite people and invite council so that we can all be there? And it can really be community members sharing their lived experiences, sharing their frustrations and their joys and their concerns. And then let's talk about it. Is it going to be the most comfortable conversation? No, it is not. It is not. There are going to be a lot of hard truths in there that we have to wrestle with. But when are we going to do it? We as a society constantly say, well, we never talk, or we always da-da-da-da, and we never make the space for that uncomfortable conversation. And what I feel the job of counselors, the job of counsel, is to be that mending bridge, that person, the people who are in the middle saying, hey guys, let's talk this out. We got to be the adults in the room that take the emotion, because that's residents and businesses. That's your job. Your job is to bring the emotion to the table. So we know how important it is, but we need to bring it there, and then we need to massage it out and go, okay, how can we make this work better for everyone?
Well, Councilwoman Jones, I think that what we're doing here is uniquely your style of leadership. First of all, you come with a servant's heart, right? You're not here to say this has to be developed or that can't be developed. It's how do we develop it to everyone's advantage, right? And I really love that. But second, you have a commitment to putting the roots of the tree of Raleigh above the fruits of the tree of Raleigh. And what I mean by that is we all want an amphitheater. It's a win-win-win, but we can't present it if it's going to do real harm to other citizens. How then do we get this meeting moving forward? What's the process?
I don't know. I think it's definitely something we're working on. I have a call with the Downtown Raleigh Alliance this afternoon to flesh out this idea, because they are they have their thumbprint on the heartbeat of the business community in downtown. And so their leadership in this and their guidance will really help us. And that's there for. That entity is in place so that they can help make those conversations a little bit smoother. And so I'm really looking forward to that phone call this afternoon to begin to say, what can this look like? And hopefully that can look like a big auditorium somewhere we can have a few hundred people come and open it up to the public, and then have a deep conversation about the issues facing Raleigh.
Well, that's fantastic. I appreciate that. Do we have time to do it right? Because I know there's a looming date. Man,
we have time. There is time. So the vote that I hear, again, I don't know what happens in future councils. We're not told until the day before, but supposedly this vote is coming on September 17th. And so we have through this time to get that done. I'm a little bit blind. I do want to say blindsided, because this all happened, like I told you, right before we went on summer break. We left for summer break on July 3rd, and we didn't hear, the first time we heard about it was June 18th. And so for a lot of business owners, for the residents who live this every day, this is their life. They know this. Council, we haven't been in session since July 3rd, since July 2nd. And so it's exhausting, because when we get back, we're just thrown right into it. And do I wish there was more time? Yes, especially since this was a project that we approved last year. I really wish that there had been an opportunity, but to that, I'm not part of that conversation. If this is something that really came up on June 10th and they told us that's the quickest they could tell us, then this is the reality that we live in. But for residents and businesses to understand that when council went on break, there wasn't a guarantee that everyone was going to have the same conversation. So we've been piecemealing this and learning this at different rates over the last few weeks.
Well, I find it both comforting and even more disturbing when I talk to the residents. Like, we were caught blindsided by it. We had no idea. What kind of leadership is that from the council? Well, the council didn't know either, right? So it's not the leadership of the council. So thank you, Mrs. Jones, for taking a very active role in trying to find a path forward that is best for the community. If you wanted to ask any one thing of our audience related to the amphitheater, a call to action, if you will, what would that be, Mrs. Jones?
That's a great question. I think what I would ask is for you to attend this meeting when we get the date set, and I hope that it's that first week of September, because in addition to coming with your concerns and your wish list of what will happen, I need you to come in open to listening, open to hearing something that's not going to make you comfortable. It's going to make you want to go, oh, I want to respond. But I would really challenge everyone involved, but that's businesses and residents alike, to come to listen, to understand, and not to respond. That's something that we as council have to that's the mode that we have to be in every decision we make, is that we are gathering all the information to make the best decision possible.
Right.
There is going to be a decision made, and it's either going to be a yes or it's going to be a no. And really, this is an opportunity to learn about the reasons behind why councils would vote either way. So come with an open mind, come ask questions, and be willing to hear what other people's lived experience are as well.
Well, Councilwoman Jones, I can't thank you enough for your time today, but specifically your servant heart's leadership on this very important issue. Raleigh, I challenge all of y'all to stay tuned. Once we have a firm date, it'll be all over the YBY network. I'm sure the city will be pushing it out, but this is a real chance for all of Raleigh to get engaged on a topic that's important to the entire city. So Ms. Jones, your servant's heart and your commitment to the roots above the fruits of the tree of Raleigh is both inspiring and admirable. I appreciate your time today.
Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you. Raleigh, we'll see you soon. Don't forget, keep your eye out. We'll be having a meeting soon. See you, Raleigh.